So while at the show on Saturday, my service sucked, but RJ texted me and said, a screen cap of a tweet from Twitter saying that Bobby Roode, at first I thought it was Bobby Roode and James Storm. Maybe that's what I wanted to see, so that's what I interpreted it as. But it was Bobby Roode and Eric Young have left TNA as of this past Saturday. They finished up at the TNA tapings over the weekend in Orlando, and they are now officially done with the organization. Now, this is big news because these guys have been there since the start. Not since the start, but since 2004. I mean, basically longer than anyone else in the company right now, with the exception of Abyss and James Storm, who left and then came back, obviously, this past year, which he might be regretting at this point, considering his tag team partner from Beer Money is gone, but I'll talk about that briefly in a minute. But yeah, kind of some shocking news. Definitely some shocking news. I remember 2-3 years ago, I think. It might have been almost exactly. It was around this time 3 years ago. Maybe a couple weeks, give or take a couple weeks. It was for their Lockdown pay-per-view. And the day of the show, Bobby Roode's contract expired, and he was one half of the World Tag Team Champions. The same exact situation 3 years ago. One half of the World Tag Team Champions defending on that night's show, and there was this huge, all this chaos surrounding whether he had re-signed or not, and they had completely forgot that his contract had lapsed. Who forgets that contracts lapse? Just stuff like that is just so TNA. It's so asinine. It's TNA. It's like, I guess, the best way to describe it. And I don't know if this was a similar situation. From what I've been reading, it wasn't. They just couldn't come to terms. They couldn't come to terms on a new deal. A lot like with Eric Young. But it is big news. Like I said, these guys have been there since 2004. That's 12 years. Through all the dark days that this company has had over those 12 years, they have been there through the thick and the thin. They've had a lot of success. 2 former tag team partners, world heavyweight champions in that company. They've basically done it all. So, I mean, you could say that TNA dropped the ball by letting them go. More so Roode than Young. I feel like Young has basically done it all. I've never been a huge Eric Young fan, but Bobby Roode has turned 5 times, both babyface and heel. He's won every title for the most part. He's feuded with everybody. It was cool to see him back with Beer Money. The first time I've really been invested in Bobby Roode's character in at least a year or two. I thought the Beer Money stuff was really, really cool to see him back together as babyfaces. I thought that was the best scenario to bring James Storm back in this past year. If there was any reason to see James Storm back in TNA, it would be, to reunite Beer Money. And that's what they did. They gave him the tag team titles. They won the belts 2-3 weeks ago, I think. And now they're over. I don't know what they do with James Storm now. I don't read the TNA spoilers. I just watch as they go along. The show has actually been pretty good. For people that have been asking me, the TNA TV product has actually been very good. There's just zero buzz around the company right now. The behind-the-scenes stuff is bad. But at least the televised product has been pretty passable for the most part. They've had a lot of great things going. Drew Galloway is their new TNA World Heavyweight Champion, so that's cool. Great for him. I don't know how much that title means at this point, but it's still a big win. It's still a big victory and a big win for him, and it obviously meant a lot to him, considering all the stuff he was saying on Twitter over the weekend. And good for him. I feel like it's a very well-deserved victory. But anyway, going back to what I was saying before, Bobby Roode gone from TNA. Like I said, Eric Young also gone from the organization. What's next for him? Not that I don't really care, but I don't really care, to be honest with you. I've never been a huge Eric Young fan, even if he did go to TNA or rather to WWE. I just don't know how he would fare. I mean, I wouldn't be pissed. I mean, it would be like, oh, that's cool, whatever. But, I'm not yearning for Eric Young in WWE. There's no interest there for me. For me anyway. I don't see Eric Young doing, faring well in WWE. Bobby Roode, on the other hand, I have this whole article up right now on hiddenremote.com that went up today as of March 22nd, depending on when you're listening to this, talking about why Bobby Roode is the perfect fit for WWE NXT, or just WWE period. There's a clip from here on the show from 2 years ago, right after Bobby Roode came back to TNA, in storyline, as a babyface, and I was saying, Bobby Roode is money. This guy is great. I've been saying this for years. I've been a big Bobby Roode fan, a big fan of the It Factor for about 5-6 years now. I've always loved Beer Money, but he really came into his own as a heel, as a single star back in 2011, 2012, when he was the longest reigning TNA World Heavyweight Champion in the company's history. Had a great reign on top, great feud with James Storm, AJ Styles, Austin Aries, one of the best matches of 2012 period in wrestling. So, I've been a big fan of Bobby Roode for a while now, and I feel like he really has all the tools to do very well for himself in WWE, whether it be NXT, like I said, or the main roster. I know AJ Styles is AJ Styles. I mean, I know Samoa Joe went down to NXT first, as did Austin Aries, so I feel like Bobby Roode wouldn't immediately jump over NXT. I mean, AJ Styles is a worldwide, well-known name, as is Samoa Joe and Austin Aries, but if they didn't jump before, if they didn't jump to the main roster, I feel like AJ Styles was the exception, and I don't think that's going to happen with Bobby Roode. I feel like he would go to NXT first, which gets no complaints from me, even if he stayed in NXT for the rest of his career, even at 40 years old, which I feel like is fine. Which, age is merely a number at this point. I wrote this in the article, but age means nothing to WWE. You've got Samoa Joe, Austin Aries, all these other guys that are in their mid to late 30s. AJ Styles is closing in on 40, if not, he's already 40. And the guy is freaking killing it right now in WWE. He had a great goddamn match with Kevin Owens last night on Raw. So that is no excuse to not sign the guy. I said the same thing about Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Austin Aries last year, and they all got signed by the company. Bobby Roode should be no exception. If they were going to give a look to James Storm and bring him in for a couple of appearances, it would not surprise me in the slightest if Bobby Roode got brought in, if only for an appearance or two in NXT, even if he's not signed. Of course, the best time to do so would be right now with NXT TakeOver Dallas right around the corner. And of course, the specials are usually the places to debut new people. Shinsuke Nakamura is making his first ever WWE appearance at that event next weekend, which should be amazing. So he might not be the only fresh face debuting at that show. We could see another new name pop up in the form of Bobby Roode, and I feel like that would be a great move for both him, the fans, and the company. He could be a great asset to WWE's developmental brand in NXT.